Well, hello and welcome back. We're looking today at perception and knowledge. In fact, we're right in the midst of the section of the course entitled Perception versus Knowledge. It's chapter 3, section 3 of the text. And what we're looking at here today is paragraph 6 of that very section. And we'll focus here on our unconscious deep, and it's deep, resistance to the truth. Yeah, resistance to the truth. We all have it. And because we all have it, it's worth bringing to light and bringing up again and again. So this is a theme that we'll visit here from time to time in the course because we see it every single day. We see it every single day, and it is a deep unconscious resistance to our own awakening. We're in our own way. This is one way of looking at what appears to be our dilemma here in the world as cut off, separate, self-sustaining survival units, individual human beings running around competing with other individual human beings that look differently from us, that live in different continents, on different sides of the world, things like that. And what the body's eyes see is, in fact, multiplicity. Multiplicity rather than oneness. So we bring our awareness back to forgiveness. We bring our awareness back to our own spiritual practice and the tradition or traditions that you follow. So here in A Course in Miracles, we bring our awareness back to what's going on all around us and choosing to see it as an opportunity to forgive. We could choose, we're invited to choose, to see our brother as our salvation, not our enemy. And yes, that requires repetition. It takes a lot of repetition. Enter this course. So let's talk about the title of this video today. No right perception, no enlightenment. I know. Yeah, this deep resistance that we have to the truth causes us to be lazy, doesn't it? You might not think of yourself as lazy in certain aspects of life, but here in spirituality, because we have this unconscious resistance, which is fear, we want to keep certain forms of judgment for ourselves. This looks like forgiving partially, which, as we know, as we're told throughout A Course in Miracles, it's not possible. Forgiveness is either total or it's not at all. Because if we're going to awaken, of course, it has to be total. We understand this pretty much intellectually. I mean, it makes sense. Yet, as a practical matter, we run up against our unwillingness to do it. We want to reserve our judgment of certain people for ourselves. We forgive some and not others because our abusive acts, yeah, no, we're not going to forgive him. We're not going to forgive her. We're not going to forgive the leader of the opposition political party who wants to take away multiple rights from me. But we make it all about ourselves. That's what the ego is. It's mine, mine, mine. The word mine, me, my. First person pronouns, things like that. That's what the ego is all about. And we see that if we don't forgive totally, if we don't correct our perception and achieve what is called here right perception, there's no awakening. is a prerequisite to awakening. No right perception, no enlightenment. So do you want the peace of God and nothing else? That's a question that we all need to ask ourselves. That is why it is a workbook lesson. I want the peace of God. Implicit in that statement is, I want only the peace of God. And until we want that, what is our motivation going to be to forgive truly? We'll want to, without really wanting the peace of God and nothing else, we're kind of in the territory of dabbling that we see in life, where we say we want something, but we kind of pull back, and we can proclaim that we do, but we really don't, because we're not doing what it takes to have that. And yes, there is a spiritual prerequisite to experiencing the peace of God and nothing else, and it is correcting our perception. As we're shown here, perception can and must be stabilized. It can and must be stabilized. It's necessary before God can communicate directly to us. If we don't perceive truly, God can't communicate directly to us because we're still holding on to some shreds of separation. We're holding on to some fragments of individuality, which, as we know, are illusions, yet we're so conditioned to love on them that they're attractive to us. Keeping those little forms of judgment for the opposition political leaders, for example. Yeah, that has some crazy, weird attraction to us. It's a moth to a flame type mentality. It really is. That's what habit can be like. And if you know addicts, or if you yourself are an addict of any kind, you'll know exactly what that is. It's just being drawn to something that you know is going to harm you, yet you can't seem to help it. That's where we find ourselves a lot of the time in the world, and that's why spirituality repeats things. That's why this course repeats ideas in multiple different forms, and sometimes in the exact same form, because it could be the 975th time that you hear an idea that it really, really hits home, and you make good on a promise that you've made to yourself and maybe others to finally practice this material, to begin to forgive the Son of God. And how long will that take? Well, I don't know. I don't know. But what you can do is ask your inner teacher for guidance, which is what we're all invited to do here in this course. So perception and knowledge, perception, subject-object, duality, the domain of the ego, yet it can and must be clarified or corrected so that we have what is known as right perception. It must be stabilized. Knowledge is stable. Knowledge is stable. And what we discover along the way as we correct our perception is that there are no strangers. God is no stranger to his Son. And the Son of God is no stranger to the Son of God. In other words, we're no stranger to our brother. How can this be? Well, there's no separation of any kind. There are no strangers. The idea of a stranger or another person is dualistic. It's a subject and an object. It's the perceiver and the perceived. Ultimately, there is none of that. But we must clarify our perception. And how do we do that? Through the practice of true forgiveness under the guidance of your inner teacher. And what happens here is that knowledge, God, right, preceded space and time and will ultimately replace it. In other words, we're all on what looks to be a journey, and in fact, we call it a journey. We're on the journey home, so to speak. We're not actually going anywhere, yet it's incredibly beneficial and helpful for us to use this language here in the world to communicate with each other. So spirituality is a process. Yes, it's a journey, it's a walk, whatever term you're comfortable using. Yes, it appears to be just that. Because most of us are given a gradual process, a gradual program of awakening where we forgive one item at a time. And it's not just in this blinding flash of light and boom, we're awakened. And as always, that means that we do have to do the work, the forgiveness. And when the Holy Spirit asks for our little willingness, it's our little willingness to forgive what's right in front of our face and our little willingness to allow him to run the show. It's getting out of our own way. Learning to perceive truly is getting out of our own way. That way we perceive that there's no separation of any kind, that we recognize that because there's no separation of any kind, and the separation never took place, our brother never did anything to us. We never did anything to him. We're both innocent. We're all innocent because we've never left our source. Capital S. Quite naturally. Ideas leave not their source. When we practice true forgiveness, as we're invited to in the Course, we reinforce this idea in our mind. And when this becomes a habit, when's that ever a shift? If you've developed this habit, you will know. If you have not yet, develop it, and you will know. And of course, it takes some commitment. Of course, it takes effort to establish this habit, to change our mind. This is a course in mind training. So yes, it requires a certain discipline. Some people hate that word, and I get that. I get that. But it requires this sort of commitment. That is why I often thank you for your commitment, for your dedication to practice. That is the highest and best offering you can give anyone, anywhere, anytime. And it's not even close. Yes, money's wonderful. Yes, hearts on social media are wonderful. Comments are wonderful. Reaching out on email or social media to express thanks, that's all wonderful. I appreciate all of that. It's all well and good, yet your spiritual practice, your commitment and dedication to practice are the most important thing. Think of who you will benefit when you truly forgive and how extensive that is. Now imagine if we all committed to this. How much differently would this world look? Oh, very, very. And we are on the journey, the path, the walk to learning to perceive truly so that God may take the final step himself. And it's worth reminding yourself anytime you feel the need to judge and blame and get carried away, that it's an opportunity to forgive. Every opportunity is, in fact, a gift, and we could choose to see it that way, even if it's extraordinarily painful at the moment. It's an opportunity for forgiveness. So the more we're aware of that, the more we train our minds to be aware of that, the more forgiveness we can do, the more miracles we can extend to our brother, and the quicker all of this happens, which I know is something that you're interested in. All right. So I invite you, as always, to join me, and with comments and questions, please feel welcome to leave them. I will respond to comments and to your questions as quickly as I possibly can. And this red arrow right here is the subscription button. I'd love to have you. Now, these YouTube videos are going on. They're ongoing, and they will continue on to be ongoing. I like to do about 5 or 6 of these a week because repetition and consistency is so important on the spiritual path, as it is in developing any habit. It doesn't matter what that habit actually is, does it? It's important to have consistency and reinforcement and repetition. So these YouTube videos of 15 to 20 minutes duration, more or less, will continue to be available. And over on my Patreon page in February, I am going to be starting a live stream, which is an opportunity to interact live, of course, and we'll have a longer session. Those will be up to an hour with about 40, 45 minutes or so of teaching, and the rest Q&A, or sometimes they might be almost all Q&A if there are a lot of questions. But it's an opportunity for us to go deeper into some of the metaphysical principles and ideas of the course. And also it will enable us to discuss our own experience in greater detail. So there will be 2 forums, one on Patreon and this YouTube channel, which I invite you to subscribe to, and I'll continue to do this. And thank you so much, as always, for your practice, for your dedication and commitment to spiritual practice above all else, because that is what's really, really important. So I appreciate that. And thank you, as always, for joining me.